And here we are. So the very first type of factoring we're going to do today is what I call easy trinomial factoring. Easy trinomial factoring happens when your leading term is just an x squared, or some people will say that the a value is equal to 1. A is the number in front of the squared term, and so when that happens to be a 1x squared, you actually don't see it because 1x squared is the same thing as x squared. When they are easy trinomials, once we find our numbers in our x box, we can easily throw them into our factors and be done, and that's why I call these easy trinomials. But you have to remember that it only happens when it's just an x squared term out in front. So we're going to go ahead and throw in our x box. And in our x box, we take the last number, which is negative 24, and we put it at the top. And that's what becomes our multiply number. So a lot of times I like to write m up there. Our middle number, which is a positive 5, also known as our b value, goes at the bottom of our x box, and that becomes our add number. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to negative 24 and at the same time add to 5, and the numbers are going to be something like an 8 and a 3. But to get a positive 5 out of them, the 3 is going to have to be negative. So that if I multiply 8 and negative 3, I get the negative 24. If I add 8 and negative 3, I get a positive 5. And so we're going to come over to the trinomial and break them up into two sets of parentheses. X squared gets chopped into x, and one will get the positive 8, and the other one will get the negative 3. And those are his two factors. If I put them back together with distribution or multiplying, I should end up with the same three terms I began with. And that's why those are its factors. If we come over to number 2 and realize that it is also a nice easy trinomial, and we set up our x box so that our negative 60, which is our c value, is at top. And negative 17 is our b value, and it goes on the bottom of our x box. Remember that the top number is the multiply number, the bottom is the add number. We have to be super duper careful in this one because there are two sets of numbers that come close to working. One set of numbers is 12 and 5. To get 12 and 5 to give you a negative 17, both would have to be negative. And why they don't work is because when you multiply them, it equals a positive 60, which then doesn't work in the top of the x box, even though it works in the bottom. So those are not the numbers. If I keep on thinking, I have a 20 and a 3 as my actual numbers. But to get the negative 17 again, we have to make sure that we tweak the signs. And I believe if we check these numbers now, when we multiply them, we get the negative 60. And when we add them, we get the negative 17. So these are our numbers. Again, because this is a nice, easy trinomial, we break the trinomial into two sets of parentheses. C squared gets chopped into C and C. One gets the negative 20, and the other gets the positive 3. And those are his two factors, and we max them up, and that one is finished. Okay. Let's head down to what we call easy trinomials with a twist. The twist is that your exponents are going to look a little different than they did in the last two. However, I still consider this easy because the leading coefficient is still 1, or just an x to the 6, or just an x to the 4. There's no big coefficient number out in front other than 1. And so that's what makes these still easy. There's a little twist, and we have to just pay attention to it before we box up our answers. So because it's a trinomial, we're going to go ahead and set up our x box. At the top is going to be our c value, which is 8, and that is our multiply number. On the bottom is going to be our b value, which is 6, and that's our add number. What two numbers multiply to 8 and add to 6? What about 4 and 2? 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 plus 2 is 6. So we're going to chop up this trinomial into two sets of parentheses, just like we did with the trinomials up above, but instead of an x squared being broken up into x and x, we have an x to the 6, which is going to get broken up into x cubed and x cubed. And then put a plus 4 in one and a plus 2 in the other. and those factors are finished. Okay. In this trinomial over here, again, easy, but with a little tiny bit of a twist with those exponents. So we set up our x box with the 30 as our multiply number. And at the bottom is our negative 17, which is our add number. This one also has two sets of numbers that come close to working as well. Let's try 15 and 2. To get a negative 17, both will have to be negative, which is perfect because when I multiply two negatives, I get the positive 30, and they'll still add to negative 17. So we're going to break this trinomial up into two sets of parentheses. The x to the fourth gets broken up into x squared and x squared, and one gets a minus 15, and the other gets a minus 2. And that trinomial is finished being factored. Next type of trinomials we're going to do are what I consider to be hard trinomials. And I consider them hard trinomials because there is a coefficient out in front that is not the number 1, like it has been in the last 4 examples. This coefficient is actually a 2. And that 2 changes the process a little bit to add more steps, as you can see what we're going to go through. But it's not terrible. So it says factor the expression. It is a trinomial. So we are going to still set up our x box. There's going to be one difference. Hard trinomials, instead of this last number being our multiply number at the top, we actually have to multiply it by the number out in front. And this is why they call this the AC method of factoring. You take your A, which is 2, you multiply it by your C, which is negative 5, in order to get the negative 10 up here. What stays the same is that your middle number, positive 9, still goes down here at the bottom of your x box. This is still our multiply number. This is still our add, and we still have to come up with the numbers that will do the job, and they are 10 and 1, except the 1 has to be negative in order for them to multiply to negative 10 and for them to add to 9. Now that we have our numbers, we have done all of these steps. We are now ready to go and rewrite the trinomial. We cannot go directly to the factors like easy trinomials. We actually have to rewrite our 3 terms of our trinomial into 4 terms, and it's actually really easy. We take our first term and we keep them the same, which is 2x squared. We then take one of our new numbers, I'm going to pick the 10, and we write it next, and it's going to be a plus 10. However, it's going to be a plus 10x, and the reason why it's an x is because the middle number up here has an x attached to it. So our 2 middle terms will also have an x attached to them. So we're going to take our other new number, which is negative 1, and make it a negative 1x. Our last number is negative 5, and that stays the same. So if you can see, the first term stayed the same, the last term stayed the same, and the 2 middle terms here came from finding our numbers in our x box and looking up as our middle term and attaching the same variable it had. The reason why we write it as 4 terms is so that we can group the first 2 and group the last 2. Out of the first group, we can go ahead, and we're actually already down here in our instructions. We're going to go ahead and pull out a 2x. Left over will be an x plus 5. Out of the second group, we have to pull out a negative 1. Left over will be x plus 5. The x plus 5s are the same, so they become our first factor, which actually could be written down here. And the guys on the outside squish together and give me my second factor of 2x minus 1. And that is our final answer. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and flip the page.